On January 7th, 29-year-old Tyre Nichols was stopped in his hometown of Memphis, Tennessee for a traffic-related incident, which tragically led to his death, allegedly at the hands of 5 Memphis police officers. The shocking video of the incident was released last week in a tour at the soul of the nation. Yesterday, Montgomery County Police Chief Marcus Jones called the officers' actions indefensible, and County Executive Mark Elrich and the County Council issued a joint statement that reads as follows. Our nation once again mourns the brutal loss of a young Black man's life at the hands of law enforcement and must now cope with the collective trauma that this tragedy has triggered. Jim, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Your wealth of experience as a prosecutor in New York and here in Maryland and as a federal prosecutor is needed for this discussion. As an attorney, I realize that the police officers involved in the Tyre Nichols case are entitled to a defense, but what has been seen so far on the video has been very disturbing. Comment, if you will, on the policing aspects of this situation.
Well, traffic stops and other issues with the police can be the most dangerous situation an officer gets into. Traffic stops and domestic violence calls are the most sensitive and risky for an officer. The videotape here, I can't use any other words other than disgusting and despicable. The man was brutally beaten. The issue for the prosecutor is to show the intent of the officers, but more importantly, there's 5 defendants, each charged with murder, and each officer had a different level of participation in the murder. So the hardest thing to do is to individually present evidence to show that they too are guilty of the murder. Like in other cases, you see some officers holding someone down, others standing guard and watch, others keeping a crowd at bay. So you have to bring in the evidence on each one individually, not collectively. I mean, collectively it's disgusting, but you can't convict someone collectively. You got to show that they individually committed murder. And I think that'd be the hardest thing to do in a case where there's so much chaos and police activity.
Even if a suspect was resisting arrest, what could lead to the violent reaction that we saw in these videos? I mean, we understand that Mr. Nichols escaped police custody when they were first trying to apprehend him. Whether or not they were using excessive force at that time really is pale in comparison to when they captured him the second time and then so savagely beat him. What could have led to that?
You're absolutely correct. Well, I mean, if the perpetrator, or now deceased, had a weapon, that certainly would justify to some extent an accelerated level of police enforcement. If there's a weapon, if someone is high to the extent of being, out of control, reaching for guns, the actions, each case stands separately. The action of the deceased certainly warrants the level of force that they use. Here, the video, to me, and it's just my opinion, these officers are presumed innocent, they exceeded the force necessary, at least from the videotape. Now, certainly they'll have an opportunity to present evidence as to why they did what they did. But in the absence of a weapon or having friends helping you, the deceased's friends, trying to help him escape, I didn't see that either.
Right.
But the officers will have a defense.
I got to go on to Maricé, Jim. Thank you for those observations. Sure. Since interactions with the police often occur during traffic stops, Maricé, there are those, including the county executive and several members of the county council, advocating re-imaging policing, which would eliminate most traffic enforcement by police. But the public seems to want, additional police activity. What's the conflict? How do we solve this conflict?
I couldn't agree more with the statements given by the police chief. These actions were indefensible, I would say savage, traffic enforcement. I'm all about automating, but at the same time, we have to look at the training aspect of a police officer's. I have heard this time and time again that the most dangerous part of a police officer's job are traffic stops. I don't know that that's really the case. And then we qualify it by domestic violence. Okay, that's a whole other set of data. But I don't know about you, but these traffic stops, especially in our area in the DMV, I mean, it's really unlikely for people to be running around with guns in their hands, especially when it comes to a traffic stop. I have visited the the police training facility over in Rockville. I spoke to the officers there and the training instructors about de-escalation. When it comes to traffic stops, they approach it as if they're going into war with a civilian. So I think we have to really commit to a culture shift within policing, not just with the audit. So of course, I'm all about the traffic automation, but also as a criminal defense attorney. And we understand that in the traffic code, we have jailable traffic offenses, like driving under the influence, like driving without insurance, like driving without a suspended license. That's really also attached to child support and other enforcement issues. But beyond that, it's really about changing the culture and the humans that are really taking on these responsibilities as law enforcement officers. Because at the end of the day, it is discretionary. But when it comes to the state laws that we have and the training that we have for officers, we have to really think about a cultural shift. How realistic is it that the most dangerous part of an officer's job is when you're enforcing somebody that's speeding or somebody that has a taillight issue? I would like to look at the data on that. We know that in Montgomery County, 110,000 traffic stops happen annually. I think we have some data. We need to keep looking so that we can update our training tools around that.
Thank you, Maricé. But there's certainly national data that would indicate that enforcement through traffic enforcement and traffic stops reduces violent crime. And Mark, there's a wealth of data and wealth of examples of that. But over the past few years, our county leaders have positions of cutting the police department, cutting traffic stops, and they seem to have different priorities than the community has, which, as we saw when they met 3 weeks ago in White Oak, we're asking for additional police resources.
Well, but let me start with sort of the premise of the LREC and those council members' idea. I think there's a minimum expectation. It's really disrespectful to the Montgomery County Police Department. I think we can expect that they can conduct traffic stops when appropriate without engaging in anything. I mean, to even use the Memphis as a standard, but without engaging in inappropriate behavior. We should expect that. We should expect that they can do law enforcement. We understand that law enforcement can be dangerous and that it can involve very trying situations, but we can also expect that the police will be able to perform the way they're supposed to be. And I think it's inappropriate for our leaders, our county leaders, to sort of challenge to say, well, we can't trust Montgomery County Police to do traffic stops, therefore we're going to go back and automate it. I think that's really the wrong answer.
Well, when I was a young attorney, I served as a prosecutor, and there were jump out squads that would, jump out in high crime neighborhoods to try to reduce the level of drug dealing, the level of violence. And those activities are very valid issues, but of course they can lead to overreach. Jim, you recently ran for Attorney General, and Maricé has, asked a question about how bad is the crime here in Montgomery County. What was your experience as you were on the campaign trail?
I thought that was the number one issue around the state. One carjacking, one murder is devastating to a family, an individual. So I look at the crime as an individual problem. People are scared. They don't go out at night in large measure anymore. But, to me, Casey, this sends a terrible message to the county council. They just got elected. Most of them are brand new. And they're sending a message that they're soft on crime. That's no good. And secondly, why, if you're going to cut back on traffic stops, would you tell the whole world? You don't tell people we're going to cut back on enforcement. Traffic stops stop drunk drivers. The cop uses a computer when you're stopped. They pick up people who are wanted on warrants in other states. They find guns. They find drugs on legitimate searches. It's a very effective and important tool for the police. Wow. And to cut back on it is the wrong signal. And who are these county council people? None of them have law enforcement experience. Who are they to tell the police how to keep us safe in
Well,
our houses when we're sleeping with our
well,
children?
we've
Who are
elected
they?
them, Jim. We've elected them. And Maricé, I want to pivot to Maricé because Maricé, when we were on the show 3 weeks ago, we were discussing the level of policing and the fact that we're having a hard time hiring police officers. Is it just a matter of hiring and training, and how do we get there to make this job, something to keep us safe?
So let me just clarify, there's a distinction between the traffic stops that I was talking about, routine traffic stops, a tail light. If that is the sole purpose for a stop, we don't need to be using a law enforcement. We're dealing with suspects and warrants out of state, et cetera. That's a whole different story. I'm talking about routine speed.
We're having a hard time hearing you, Maricé. So Mark, I'm going to just give you the last 30 seconds on this. What is the solution here? I mean, this is a terrible thing that we just saw, the terrible thing we witnessed, but we have to strike a proper balance. You got 30 seconds.
Well, I think it's important for us to have as good qualified police, and also we talked about training, but it's also appropriate for there to be management of the police force. And I think we have every right to expect that police are going to use the right appropriate measures. We don't have to micromanage them in a way that is inappropriate when they are using what are time-tested, sound police methods. And I think that's the appropriate standard for us to use here in Montgomery County.
Thank you. And Maricé, I'm sorry that I had to interrupt you. You were fading in and out a little bit at the very end. Jim, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for joining us today. You provided valuable insight for us. And now when we come back from this short break, there is a group of concerned parents who wants to remove 2 books from the Baltimore public school system. Stay tuned.